Okay, so I did Nat Turner. Um, to begin, he was born into slavery on October 2nd, 1800 in Virginia. He was given the nickname by his owner Benjamin, who actually died when he was only 10 years old. When Nat was only 10 years old in 1810, and Nat was subsequently named the property of his Ben's brother Samuel. So Nat had his mother growing up while they were slaves. However, his father wasn't around, although it's believed that he did escape slavery when Nat was young, and Nat also knows that and believes that. Even in our readings that we've seen, Nat's pretty religious, and he was often seen. It was reported that he was often seen praying, fasting, and preaching the Bible to his fellow slaves, and they gave him the nickname the Prophet. So he had a vision. He was it's pretty a good idea that we could call him a visionary. And he said that he had a natural intelligence and quickness of apprehension, and he learned to read and write from a young age. Um, His religious practices led to his visions, which then he believed to be messages from God on what to do. These messages were so influential on him that he escaped when he was only 22 years old, so he was pretty young. And he eventually returned, I believe it was a month later, and disclosed information about these recent religious revelations that he had. So, um, Nat's revelations ultimately led him to believe that God had set him out to do good for himself and others. And this message is clear in the quote when he explained right here, I heard a loud noise in the heavens, and the Spirit instantly appeared to me and said the serpent was loosened, and Christ had laid down the yoke he had borne for the sins of men, and that I should take it on and fight against the serpent, for the time was fast approaching when the first should be last and the last should be first. So Nat believed this event was a message from God to confront the anti-kingdom, which is the opposite of what God wanted. And this anti-kingdom was pretty much what slavery represented, and this ultimately acted as his primary motivation for the beginning of a rebellion. So the early stages of the rebellion, Nat said that certain actions via the weather will be signs to begin this uprising. Um, February 11th, 1831, there was a solar eclipse that was seen in Virginia, or that was at least visible in Virginia. And Nat then consequently planned July 4th to be the start. And then August 31st, well, let me backtrack. July 4th was the planned original start, and then it didn't happen due to illnesses and stuff, so he postponed it. And then on August 13th, a second one appeared, and then Nat saw this opportunity to begin the rebellion and believed it was the final sign by God to begin the rebellion. So his slave rebellion, the goal was to spread terror and alarm among whites and people who kept blacks as slaves. And so I did Nat Turner from our author discussion. To begin his early life, he was born into slavery on October 2nd, 1800 in Virginia. And then he was given the nickname by his owner, Benjamin, who died when Nat was only 10 in 1810. And Nat was subsequently named the property of Ben's brother, Samuel Turner. And it's not really sure if Nat gave himself the last name Turner, but that's what he was pretty much recorded as. Everybody knew him as Nat Turner. So Nat had his mother growing up, and they were both held as slaves under Benjamin. His father wasn't in his life growing up, but it is believed that he escaped slavery when Nat was young, and Nat also knew this and believed this. Um, and as we've seen in the readings, Nat was deeply religious, and he was often seen praying, fasting, and preaching the Bible to his fellow slaves, and they gave him the nickname the Prophet. So we often turn to God for help and used him as a tool for motivation for the future. So he had a vision. Nat was pretty much a visionary, and many said that he had a natural intelligence and quickness of apprehension, and he learned to read and write from a young age. Um, so his religious practices led to his visions, which then he believed to be messages from God. And the messages were so influential that he escaped when he was only 22 years old. And then he did quickly return about a month later and disclose information about these recent revelations that he's been having. So these revelations ultimately led him to believe that God had set him out to do good for himself and others. And this message is clear in the quote by Turner when he explained, I heard a loud noise in the heavens, and the Spirit instantly appeared to me and said, the serpent was loosened, and Christ had laid down the yoke he had borne for the sins of men. And that I should take it on and fight against the serpent, for the time was fast approaching when the first should be last and the last should be first. And this was pretty much Nat believed this event was a message from God to confront the anti-kingdom that slavery represented, which pretty much opposed God's vision for his own kingdom, and this ultimately acted as Nat's primary motivation for the beginning of a rebellion. So the early stages of the rebellion, Nat claimed that certain actions via the weather will be signs to begin this uprising, and on February 11th, 1831, a solar eclipse was seen in Virginia, or at least was visible in Virginia. And then he originally planned July 4th to be the start of this rebellion, but he postponed it due to illnesses and other complications going on. And then on August 13th, a second solar eclipse appeared, and Nat saw this as a final sign to finally begin his rebellion. So his slave rebellion, his goal was to spread terror and alarm among whites and others who held blacks pretty much as prisoners. And this rebellion incorporated 70 total colored men, not only from his own slave plantation, but also in the nearby neighborhoods. Um, and they sang songs to let their intentions known to other enslaved individuals, so that other people in the town wouldn't know what they were trying to do. So these songs were kind of almost like acted as Morse code for the slaves. And when the rebellions start, they use knives, axes, and these other blunt instruments instead of firearms, so that people wouldn't hear what's going on, and whites wouldn't be able to stop the rebellion before it didn't even matter. And there's no discrimination of who was killed. So obviously men were killed, but women and children were killed as well. Pretty much anyone who was seen as a threat to the blacks. An example, Nat actually confessed to a murder of a lady, and he used a fence post to kill her. And there's a death toll of a total of about 60 people before a white militia was formed and brought the uprising to a halt. And then mostly all whites who were in the path of this rebellion were killed. Turner spared poor white people because he believed that they faced just as much hardship as the Negroes did and weren't even able to look at themselves as more worthy than the blacks were. So he definitely spared them. And the consequences, the rebellion was stopped about 2 days later, but he was found hiding in a hole covered with fence nails in late October, which is pretty impressive. And it was 2 months after the rebellion came to a halt, and he was able to hide and stay secret for 2 months. But he eventually was found by a farmer, and he was on November 11th. He was November 5th. He was trialed, and then November 11th he was hung, flayed, and beheaded as an example to other people who would eventually who were maybe thinking of doing a similar rebellion. And he didn't receive any proper formal burial. But his skull was given to Richard Hatcher, the former mayor of Gary, Indiana, in '02 for a civil rights museum he was planning on building. And the skull was now given to his descendants and may be buried in a family cemetery, given the DNA tests if they come back positive. And now his legacy, he's regarded as a hero of resistance, and his act is believed as patriotic, and it is quoted that future generations will remember him among the noble and brave. And so in the Confessions of Nat Turner, it was also believed that politics have pretty much analyzed everything that went on in his time and have regarded his actions with the same spiritual logic that many jihads and terrorists use today in terms of foreseeing the future and seeing messages from God on what to do, especially because jihads and terrorists today see these messages and see it as an opportunity to go kill others, which is pretty much the same thing that Nat Turner saw. So there's a lot of analogies used and relations used, and here are my references, and that is Nat Turner's life and legacy.